A very warm welcome to the program. I'm Felicity Ezewuike. Sincere apologies for starting a bit behind schedule. In a speech delivered to New Partnership for Africa's Development NEPAD heads of states and government of the AU Summit on January the 29th, 2016, President of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, said, regional integration, I'm quoting now, is critical for expanding the size of our markets. We must integrate Africa, grow together and develop together. Our collective destiny is tied to breaking down the barriers separating us, end of quote. His words are even more resounding today when Africa's Development Dynamics 2022, to be released publicly on May 4th, set the continent's economic growth back. No thanks to the pandemic, we will reach 3.9% in 2022, 1 percentage point lower than the growth rate for the rest of the world, which stands at 4.9%. COVID-19 also reversed progress in reducing poverty in Africa, pushing at least an additional 29 million people into extreme poverty. And then there is the war in Ukraine. Still, last I checked, the continent continues to be home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies, and we're not known for accepting the status quo without a fight. Growth and development is a must, so we will attempt in our conversation today to review Africa's integration efforts in the light of fast-moving realities and explore ways we can accelerate things through economic and developmental reforms. I was supposed to have Dr. Sana Daboe for this conversation, but he had a sudden emergency. But we're happy to welcome to one slot Professor Gitile Naituli for stepping in at short notice. We thank him very much. Just to establish that he has over 20 years of experience in business management and leadership development gained from extensive consulting, facilitation, teaching, and research. He is currently a commissioner at the National Cohesion and Integration Commission and serves as Associate Professor, Business Management and Leadership at Multimedia University of Kenya. He is also a visiting professor of service learning at the University of Virginia, USA, and sits on the advisory board of Environic Foundation International, also in the US. Thank you very much for joining us on one slot.
Thank you.
Now,
I'll correct only one thing. I'm a full professor, not an associate.
Oh, you are now congratulations and thank you very much. My apologies for the mix-up. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also thank you for joining us on such short notice. Let's just get on with it. We know that efforts at integration is as old as the Organization of African Unity, what we now know as the African Union. What for you would be a defining move towards this end? I mean, Africa's integration in the last decade.
Well, the defining moment would be a political and economic African integration, because Africa has slightly over 1.5 billion people. That's a huge market. So both the political and the economic integration could do it for Africa. But before we can reach there, we need the proper leadership. We need transformational leadership. We need the leaders who can put us together. We need the leaders in the amount of Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, the real Africans who are here, the founding fathers, who can say, of African independence, because those who are Africanists, you can call them African nationalists if you want. So the trend between Africa is undermined by the West, is undermined by trade with China, which is exploitative, but trade within Africa is beneficial. So what will do for us, economic, political unit of Africa, and then transformational leaders instead of the current transactional leaders that we have. Because any project which can be initiated, which will bring us together with the current crop of leadership we have. Fortunately, we lost the Magufuli of Tanzania, who was one of those transformational leaders. We can move.
Let me
Because
interject. Let me interject and maybe rephrase the question. I'm actually trying
yes.
to find out for you. We've talked about integration a lot. You know, getting Africa to work as a holistic entity. What I'm trying to ask is, if you were to look back in history, let's make it closer. Over the last decade, what would you say is a defining moment that in our efforts to integrate as a continent?
Or maybe if you are looking at the first scale, the strengthening of the East African community, the strengthening of ECOWAS, the West Africa Economic Bloc, that has brought, is closely moving to bring us more and more together in building this bloc. But also the formation of the infrastructure department within the African Union, because that's the infrastructure department within the African Union is moving towards having a railway, for example, what they call standard and gauge railway, connecting more and more African countries. Then the roads connecting more African countries. Then removal of trading barriers within Africa, okay? Elimination of trading barriers, which are many within Africa, elimination of restrictions on movement of people, meaning movement of labor within the African continent. Now, the East African bloc has achieved that, because right now, all you need to move to Rwanda, to go to Uganda, to go to DR Congo, whatever, it's just your national identity card within the bloc. So if the West African bloc does that, and then within the West African bloc, they remove restrictions on the movement of people and goods, that we don't do it. The moment we remove tariffs, the moment we allow free movement of goods and people within the African continent, that moment, the trend will more than go drop.
I mean, you just sort of encapsulated what the Africa Free Trade Area is about. I'm talking about the AFCFTA. Its implementation began in January 2021. So it's just about a year plus when we talk about implementation. I don't want to be generic with asking what the challenges are. I want us to look at some of the things that we are already doing in trying to integrate Africa. So let's take that one, for instance. We'll also go back to ECOWAS. You mentioned them in your comment, your opening comment. So what would you say, or rather, how would you describe our movement with the free trade area agreement that has been signed and that has been that has come into
free trade
effect?
Area is actually in blocks, and that is a problem because you also have the COMESA, the common market for East and Central Africa.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but this one, this trade,
we have not harmonized the tariffs, the economic planning within the COMESA. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it as Africa-wide now. Africa continental free trade area. Is it too early to begin to maybe assess how it is
I can't hear you properly. We're having some interaction.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Some interruption.
Okay, Prof, can you hear me now?
You know, you have several blocks within that.
Okay, you know what? Let's go on a very, very short break and try to fix the audio connection. And when we come back, we'll try and take the Prof on other areas. Do stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. You're still watching One Slot. We apologize for the sporadic interruption. It's internet connection. Sometimes it does act up. Our guest is not with us physically in the studio. I'm talking about Professor Gitile Naituli. Thank you very much for staying with us. We're glad to reconnect with you. So just before we went on the break, we were talking about the Africa Free Trade Area, and I wanted to know your perspective. Is it too early to begin to assess if it has any soft impact on integrating Africa?
1 year is too short for any economic impact on a new established free trade area, because there are several steps you need to take towards accruing the benefit of a free trade area. First, you need to establish a common market. You need to harmonize tariffs. You need to harmonize the infrastructure within the free trade area. You need also to have laws, in other words, harmonize the movement of individuals, movement of goods. So before all these things, when you enter into that contract, then the partner states need to ratify those agreements. We don't know how many countries have ratified the Africa Free Trade Area agreements. 1 year is way too short, I think. But because you are having already trading in blocks, you have the COMESA, for example, it's easy to move in harmonization, and within 3 to 5 years, we should start getting different benefits as a trading block, as an African Free Trade Area block.
Okay. For the benefit of those who might not know, could you tell us the full acronym for COMESA? I'm actually trying to check it out, but I don't. I know it's a regional body.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I was saying is that there are some steps which are required in order to realize the benefits of the African Free Trade Area. You have the East African, for example, common market, then you have the COMESA. You need to harmonize all these blocks to fit in one. Then you have the ECOWAS in West Africa. I think we are missing here something, although Egypt is part of the COMESA, and these other Arab countries, what you call Arab countries within Africa, part of COMESA. So there is all this work which has to be done in order to realize the benefit of a free trade area. 1 year is way too short for that.
All right, still staying with the free trade area agreement. The plan is to find a common market that will integrate all parts, not just sub-region, all parts of Africa. And I think the target is to grow our combined GDP of around $3.4 trillion. But there are obstacles. You've already highlighted that there are some things that need to be in place if we are to grow a regional market like that. So what are some of these obstacles? You've mentioned infrastructure and the trade. Is it that there are sub-unit, economic unit that is affecting the implementation of the free trade area?
I think the most important of those is the free movement of people and goods. Harmonization of tariffs, that is extremely important. Removal of trade barriers. Some of them are legislated, other barriers are not legislated. So removing all those barriers, those take time because you have to take them through parliament. You have to make the public agree. So there is all that which has to come together. The economic, the integration will have to take into account all that. Infrastructure, movement of goods, movement of people, and then harmonization of tariffs, and even harmonization of economic policies. So that the planning, the economic planning, including education, all that has to be harmonized. You see, like the US, why it has benefited from the continental, because the United States is a huge trading area, is because of that. It's because the infrastructure is in place, the harmonization of education is in place, there is no inter-state tariffs in place, so there is harmony. So I think the African continent will move into harmonizing that, and then collapsing regional economic blocks into the bigger trading block.
You mentioned in your first opening comments about you mentioned the need for a localized currency that everybody can easily use. That takes me to the ECOWAS, the body has been trying since 2003 to create a regional currency, the ECO. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, well, I'm not really, I can't say I'm terribly familiar with it, but I know to make the block work, you need a currency that people understand, which is cutting across the block. Now, to do that, there are certain economic parameters which a country must achieve in order to be allowed into a common trading currency. So all that has not been, the body is just 1 year old. So there is all that which need to be worked out. Because even East African, which is an old one, has not achieved the common currency. We have not achieved that, although we have the East African shilling, but the Ugandan shilling and the Tanzanian shilling and the Kenyan shilling, they all trade at different levels when they are supposed to trade at the same level. So to do that, there are certain indicators, economic indicators, which have to be achieved by every state in order now to fluently fit into a common trading bloc.
Okay, of what you're saying, I want us to look at regional economic communities away from ECOWAS for a second. It's under the AU bodies, but AU, but some of these regional economic communities are not captured within the AU. I think the COMSA you talked about is also a regional bloc, as we have the EAC, the East African communities. There is a question about the effect of these smaller units within the bigger AU body when it comes to economic integration. How do you think this is affecting the bigger picture of integrating the whole of Africa?
It will undermine the big picture. Because even within the East African Common Market, if you want to call it that, you have members of SADC, Southern Africa Economic Bloc, and then you have the East African Economic Bloc. Then you have the ECOWAS Economic Bloc. That will undermine the African bloc, because harmonizing all this, you see the East Africans, for example, they have a problem because Tanzania is also a member of SADC. So the Tanzanian policies sometimes don't match with the other East African policies. So we need to get rid of these regional blocks and just have one continental African free trading bloc. When you have that one, then we are more likely to reap the benefits than continuing with the South Africa, SADC, the East African Common Market, the ECOWAS. We need to collapse them into one body.
Okay, just before we move on with the conversation, let me quickly intimate some of our viewers who might not know this. My guest, Professor Naituli, has mentioned COMSA. The acronym stands for Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, and it was formed in 1994. It has several countries in the region, Eastern and Southern Africa, and that goes back to what we're talking about, regional economic communities that belong to different economic blocks, and you just highlighted that it does affect.
So you get a country belonging to different ones.
Yes, yes. So that is definitely impacting the effort to get a nationwide, a continent-wide integration when it comes to economics. So let me put an open question to you. Africa is known to have regional interests, so to speak, and the African Union was created to find a way to, in spite of our differences, we can still come together and grow as a continent. In my intro, we talked about, I mentioned that we are contrasting, we're not growing along with the rest of the world. Globally, they are projecting that they will grow at 4.9%, while Africa is 1 percentage point lower at 3.9%. So what do you think would be a fitting move in our efforts at integration that will propel us faster to meet with that growth, economic growth projection with the rest of the world?
You know, for economy to move anywhere, you need good leadership. One of the biggest weaknesses for Africa is actually leadership. We have never had strong leaders, visionary leaders, and when we do have them, then they are undermined by the West, because the West needs to exploit Africa, and they cannot exploit Africa as long as Africa has strong leaders. So this is the weakness. So you have African countries pulling, some pulling to China, others are pulling West. They are not pulling together so that they can have a stronger and a bigger voice. So there's no infrastructure, education aside, because this continent has heavily well-educated people. Our problem is weakness in our leadership structure. The architecture of the African leadership is one thing. When that eventually is harmonized, then we will be fine. Remember, before they got rid of Gaddafi, he wanted to tie the African currency to gold. He wanted to get us out of the dollar, so that it is now possible actually to get the value for our natural resources, which are plenty in Africa. But the Muzungus got rid of it extremely fast. Well, Muzungu means Europeans, meaning that the Americans, basically. Obama was one of those who bombed Libya. So leadership, and more leadership. That is the lacking ingredient.
Beyond leadership, which is extremely important, there is also the talk about infrastructure and improving our value chain, production chain, if you please.
You see why leadership has to be linked to infrastructure, for example. Is there is the plan of having within Africa, okay, a transcontinental railway transversing through Mombasa, for example, all the way to Kinshasa, and then up to N'Djamena, wherever, through those other countries. But what did we get when we drew these pieces? Uganda, for example, refused to join. Rwanda refused to join because the Kenyan portion for that standard railway gauge was way too expensive and reasonably expensive because the corruption then filtered in. So this is why I'm telling you leadership is basically the missing ingredient, because the resources we have for infrastructure in place can be put quickly, but then we don't have the leadership to drive the financial policies, to drive infrastructure investments, because our levels of corruption are way too high and reasonably high. So this is the thing, because you see, what you look at the American railway system, look at what you can see now in Europe, from what you can see even from Ukraine.
Okay, let me interject.
The transportation system is well established.
All right, we will
connecting people.
Okay, you do have a point there. When we come back, I would like you to expand on your thoughts about you mentioned leadership and regional interest and state interest. How are all of these conflicting with the bigger picture of Africa integration? And how do you think that, we can work around these challenges and still get to the goal of integrating Africa? We'll go on a short break. We'll be right back. Our guest is still with us. Good to know you're still with us. I still have Professor Gitile Naituli with us. He joins us virtually, and we've been talking about how we can integrate Africa through economic reforms. Thank you very much, Prof. Before we went on that break, I did intimate that I'll be exploring, you mentioned COMSA, this is a regional block away from ECOWAS, and I'm not sure, I think it's captured under the REX, that's the regional economic communities. And then you also talked about state interest. The question I'm asking is, how are these regional and state economic interests affecting the goal of a holistic African integration?
They're having a huge impact. I would just have to give you an example of the East Africa. The East Africa, there was a plan to start engagement through Kenya to Congo, and then have a port in a place called Lamu, build another pipeline actually to South Sudan, from Uganda, South Sudan to Lamu for exporting oil. Now, the Kenyan corruption has collapsed that project. The other people who are willing to join in, the Ugandans who are ready, South Sudanese who are ready, Rwandese who are ready, but the Kenyans inflated the costs so much that they decided not to join because they couldn't afford it. So it had to stop in Kenya, the started engagement. So regional, not just regional interests, but individual leaders within these countries, when they don't have the interests of their citizens at heart, when they lead for themselves, then they also affect neighboring states. That is a problem that I have no idea we are supposed to deal with it. Because until we can have people genuinely interested, because promoting trade simply means uniting the continent and promoting economic well-being of the continent in totality. So you need the people at the level of Julius Nyerere and Mandela to do that.
Well, do you think we don't have those people? Because as much as yes, developmental, we do not.
Have those people.
What about people who are the helm of affairs in Africa? A quick thought will be the African Development Bank director. We have people work in president, I beg your pardon. We also have people in the AU who are working to see how they can help. We have ECOWAS, people that are working there. Are you saying that in the whole of Africa, we don't have the kind of leadership that will propel the kind of integration that will lift Africa to meet the global goals?
Exactly.
So how do we fix it? How do we fix it? How do we begin to get this kind of leaders?
I have no idea, because in East Africa, we are the one who just died the other day. That is Magufuli of Tanzania. What I'm saying is lead selfless leaders. Let me just be more forthright. The SGR from Mombasa to Malaba in Kenya was estimated to cost 55 billion by the president who just died the other day, Mwai Kibaki. Probably the best president Kenya has ever gotten. It cost 512 billion. The money was inflated corruptly. So you don't have the likes of Captain Sankara. You don't have the likes of Julius.
One of the goals of this conversation of one slot is to look for uniquely African solutions to our African problem. So when you say that we have a problem with leadership, you are a scholar who has been in the academia for many years. So if you were to just let's not look at it from too much of an academic point of view. Let's look at it from a humanistic point of view. How can we go about addressing the question of leadership in Africa? Because all your submission has been that it is integral to whatever developmental strides we need to make.
Absolutely, it is. And the entire population into transformation. We need to transform the way we think. We need to transform our value system. It is our value system which is upside down, and unfortunately, the colonial structure has a lot to do with that. But you can't always externalize your problem if you need to solve it. You need to internalize it. What we need to ask ourselves, why is it that our best leaders don't live long enough? Why did the Captain Sankara not live long enough? The leadership we're creating through the university system, because we have students, young people, we are trying to bring into leadership. Why is it that then when they join the other leaders in the field, they now change? Now, we need a continental catharsis. You talked about humanistic. We need to be more human. We need to love ourselves. We have a problem with the self-love. We love money. We love external gratification more than we love ourselves. We need to do that. And when we find those leaders, the one I'm just talking about, they are very rare. For example, if you take Nigeria and Kenya, Nigeria has never produced a good leader. So is Kenya. Kenya has produced one, Mwai Kibaki, but he came when he was already too old. What is it in our culture?
All right, I think we lost your audio. Prof, can you hear me?
What is it in our culture? Now, as a professor of business management and leadership, I can tell you that the Europeans made a revolution when they came here. The Africans who loved themselves and loved their people, they didn't go to church to become Christians. They did not get education. The lower class, because every society has another class. That other class got education. That other class took the reins of the power because it went to the church, got education. It took the reign of power when the European left. That other class is still the one ruling the country. Ruling within the continent. It is the Mobutu Sesekos, India means Jomo Kenyatta, all the people who are basically caused total mess for us.
All right, I think you've actually I think you've summed it up when you said we need to reassess the way we think, the way we view leadership, and hopefully we will get the kind of leadership that will address some of our continental issues, and we can grow to meet the other parts of the world. Thank you very much, Professor Gitile Naituli, for speaking with us, especially for jumping in at such short notice. Thank you very much.
Asante sana.
All right, that's about our conversation today. We're supposed to have this conversation with Dr. Sana Darboy. Hopefully we can get him and have this conversation again and hear his own perspective on the issues around integrating Africa through economic reforms. In parting, I'd like to encourage you to look out for Africa's Development Dynamics 2022 edition, a partnership. It's a production between the AU Commission and the OECD Development Center. This edition explores how developing regional value chains can help African countries rebound from the socio-economic shocks of the COVID-19 pandemic and accelerate productive transformation. It proposes, among other things, a new collaboration between countries and regions, focusing on mutual learning and the preservation of common goods. It aims to assist African leaders in reaching the targets of the African Union's Agenda 2063 at all levels, continental, regional, national, and local. It's coming out to the public on May 4th. I want to thank you very much for watching and your patience. I'll see you next time. I'm Felicity Ezewuike.